welcome everybody to this first show of Anna Melikian Talks Mindsets with a very, very special guest, CB Bowman. And I've been helping many people with LinkedIn and even to do LinkedIn Lives. And finally, I decide to leverage this wonderful technology to have conversations about one of the topics more near to my heart, that is mindsets. Nowadays, we can lift a rock and everybody's speaking about mindsets, and we have lots of mindset experts. And I think it's a good thing, but it's also important to go deep about what is this thing that we call mindsets. I see mindsets like this set of beliefs, like lenses that we have, glasses that we can put that allow us to see the world in a certain way. And I really believe that we have different sets, different mindsets that can be more helpful for us to look, for instance, our professional life in different stages of our professional lives and even our personal lives. And I want to create a safe space for us to speak about that. And I thought that CB Bowman will be the ideal person to start this conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
So, first of all, as I just said, I have to tease you because you didn't allow me time to polish my nails. And I have to be a diva. So, but second and most important, thank you so much for inviting me onto your inaugural show. I'm so excited. Congratulations. So, mindset. And listen, audience, this is, very casual. Love to chat with each other. I always learn so much from this woman. It's scary how her brain works, right? But I will tell you also that I will probably be coughing a little bit because I'm in my beloved Colorado. And sadly, we have had such bad air coming in from California, Oregon, and even the Sahara desert with the dust storm. So it's reactions. So, but you know what? We're all friends, so let's go, right? Mindset. So I believe this might be much to do about nothing, or it could be a lot to do about something. The word mindset itself. I firmly believe that my translation for mindset is my own internal radar. So that radar tells me how I'm going to view things, how am I going to view myself, and how am I going to manage my behavior? Is it based upon how I was raised? Look at the military hat. My dad was in the military, a lieutenant colonel. So, but my mom was the boss. Get that, right? Women's power way back. Um, Very strict upbringing, middle class, Black American, and yet surprised by many of the things that happened to me as a Black American going into the business world. My mindset could have taken me down a negative river. My radar told me how to survive, how to conquer, how to accomplish what I've accomplished in life. So I believe that your mindset really directs you, just like a compass, right? It swings back and forth. Does that help, Anna?
Yes, I like, yeah, because the mindset, if we see, and there are many ways of defining it, but if we see this mindset as the beliefs that we have, and often these beliefs are in a subconscious level, it's the way that we are raised, the people that we surround ourselves with, and that condition us the way that we see the world and give us the values that compass. But it's important also that I think is what you say with the radar, that we don't have to be stuck in our mindset. and we can evolve our mindset. And that is one of the things that I love about the work of Carol Dweck, that introduced the concept of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, that really make us think of the mindset in a much more flexible way, that I think is so helpful. But to bring the conversations to concrete things, I want to, so you start to speak a little bit about your history of origin, your family, and so you were raised in New York, correct?
I
You
was
brought,
actually raised, yes. My first beginnings were in New York in the Lower East Side, which was basically, it was at that time, all Jewish. And
interesting.
so I was able to really be immersed in the Jewish culture and understand my Jewish colleagues as I've grown up, right? In a way that I'll tell you a fun story. My first boyfriend was Jewish, and he was also a photographer, so he took some pictures of me and he showed them to his mom. And I had spoken to his mom on the phone, and he said, "No," and she said, "That's not her. The person I spoke to is Jewish." And he said, "No, that's her." And she said, "But how's that possible? She knows all of our phrases, our terms." And he said, "That's CB." So, and then the next neighborhood I was raised in was all Italian. So I started to get my international flavoring from the neighborhoods that I was raised in.
And that, and now you are married with an Italian. So the
Ah,
circle
yes.
of
Oh, Moran, as we say,
but
the storms
yeah.
are frequent between the Black culture and the Italian culture. We have a lively household.
Yep, I love that. So with this, so and that is the magic, I think, of New York, is this diversity, this melting pot with so much diversity and opportunity of people to meet so many different people. And tell me about how that helped you when you got your first corporate job.
Well, that's an interesting story in itself because sadly, my first corporate job, I was faced with extreme racism and I wasn't prepared for it. And so I really didn't know how to handle it. And it caused a lot of psychological turmoil in my mind, in my head. My mindset was one of, I will figure this out. I had the confidence to figure it out. I was able to find the right people within the company and outside the company to support me and to guide me along with my upbringing. And so I think I was lucky in a very bizarre way. I was lucky to experience the racism because to me, it made me, this is going to sound really weird, it made me a whole person, right? It allowed me to understand the turmoil and the angst that other people go through, whether it be as a result of war crimes or other biases that they experience. It allowed me to have confidence in myself that I could solve this and try to figure out ways around it. It allowed me to understand that I needed to seek out other people and explore words of wisdom that they offered me.
So you really, but you had enough self-esteem and strength to believe that you could overcome the challenge,
I
and
had enough I had enough courage to fight back and to figure out ways that I could find people around me that respected and loved me enough to support me in learning how to fight back in various methods. And for this particular situation, the method was learning corporate speak, learning corporate behavior, learning how to challenge back corporately.
And what was the mind? So, what was the way? So, trusting in yourself, in your courage, surrounding yourself, bringing other people to help you, and that is saying a lot because sometimes we don't look for these alliances, but you look for this alliance. Can you tell us a specific story that illustrates this?
Oh, I can tell you many stories. I remember that I had a manager who asked me to go, well, mandated that I go and pick her up lunch. And it wasn't in a form of let's have lunch. Do you want to pick it up or I could pick it up? That sort of, inclusion way. It was you go and get me lunch. And when I refused to, she sat and drew pictures of little pygmies with bones in their head and distributed them in the department that were representations she felt of me.
Whoa,
Yeah.
this was other times. But
We say it
how?
was other times, but Anna, I don't know what other people's experiences is and how it translates into life is the killing of Floyd. So it's not really other times,
Yeah,
right?
it's,
This
it's
perhaps was more subtle because I'm still walking this earth and able to talk about it. Sadly, Floyd isn't.
yeah. No, it's you totally raise you raise, yeah. So, I think now corporations and people in corporations will not do that, unfortunately, because they are afraid of the consequences of it, not because they change their own mindset about the right thing to do in many cases.
I have to challenge that. I
Okay.
think this is absolutely being done in corporations now. I think that what's happened is corporations have become smarter about how they do it. And so it may not look like the killing of Floyd as we see in public. We may
Yeah.
not see pygmies being drawn, as in my case, but isn't it the same thing when you don't allow people to flourish in an organization, when you don't allow inclusion in organizations? When you're not offered the opportunity for promotions, you're not trained the same as somebody else. This is really all the same thing. It's just shades of difference.
Yeah, it's more subtle, um, that we can argue. Oh, people are still alive, people are all that, but because it's subtle, it's more difficult to see and more difficult to fight against.
Yeah. I mean, the old expression is for people of color, is it better to live in the South or better to live in the North? Well, in the South, racism is spoken about, unlike pre-Floyd. It's experience. You know your boundaries, which are sad, but they are boundaries and they are known. In the North, it's covert. So, which is better, knowing or hidden, right?
Uh,
And we talk about, let's talk about mindset. Um, Having the mindset to lead you through whatever adversity you face is the true goal of mindset, in my opinion. Now, Anna, you come from the beautiful Portugal. And for everybody, that's Anna's accent, which love. She adds S's to things and things like that. But I'm sure when she came here to the United States, Anna, you could speak to this, there were challenges that you faced, but you had the mindset and the intelligence and the smarts to not only survive, but to flourish.
yeah, and I will go one step back first here, because when you ask, and we always challenging each other because that is part of our friendship culture. and it's the way that we learn new things and we think things in a different perspective. So I'm going to challenge you respectfully. I think is I find it more helpful instead of asking what is better, this like you were saying in the specific case, the South or the North in terms of the explicit or implicit in relation to a topic so serious as racism. Uh, I think uh, um, take for me, I find more helpful to ask what is different and what can we do about it.
Yes.
And even for me, what was different from coming from Portugal here, my image of the United States, and I already had come and visit the United States several times before I moved back in 2003 when I moved here to the US. I had a very biased view of the United States in a good way. In a good way, a lot of the positive things that we admire about the United States, to the point for instance, in the Olympic Games that just finished recently in 2021, that we are recording this. But back in the time when I was living in Portugal, there were Olympic Games. Of course, the first athletes that I was cheering was the Portuguese. And then if there was not Portuguese playing, well, maybe the Brazilians because they also spoke Portuguese. But after that, were the Americans because of the representation of freedom. And I know that different countries can have a different way of seeing the United States, but in Portugal, when I was raised, was like the really the example of democracy, the example of the country of opportunities. That was the image that I came in, and also the other side of my mindset around the United States, my bias on the way and belief sets about the United States was through the TV series and to the movies. And most of them are in the coasts, East and West Coast. So my first shock was when I moved to the United States and I want to start to learn more about the United States was the diversity, good and bad, of everything in between. And what I realized that you here in the US, we speak the same. We have a common language, the English, with different accents, of course, but there's a common language. But is in many ways like in Europe, each state has its own different culture and ways of seeing things. But in Europe, we because we have things are different countries with different language, we know that, of course. Here was was a surprise that. And the things that I was interesting in a positive way, and other things that, oh my gosh, that seems I will never thought that that will happen in the United States. So it's fascinating, but help us to, I think I always like to see as, I think diversity is really a strength, and we have to, even things that we don't agree with, we have to be humble to try to understand it, even if at the end we don't agree with it still. But there is a learning process that is important for us to try to understand.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think that that is contrary to what I've said. I think it's additional information. Um, when you become aware of the North versus the South, understanding why in some cases it's covert, in some cases it's not. I think it's important to understand that and to acknowledge the difference, right? It's not panacea. Everything is not always the same. And in order to help solve, you have to recognize,
Yes.
right? I remember being in a conversation with a coach whose family members are part of the Proud Boys. And she was informing us about the mindset of the Proud Boys. And, ironically, I thought it was very interesting. I wasn't looking at it as a race situation. I was looking at it as learning more about how other people view things, which I think is your point.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that I've traveled so much allows me to have a greater viewpoint. I remember growing up, I thought, I can't wait to leave the United States, right? So I was an Army brat, but my mom believed the children should have one place called home and not travel. But I was always jealous of my father traveling. So I couldn't wait to travel. Now, I will talk to you, I'll give you a really great example of mindset that went haywire. I decided that I was going to find my father, who was stationed in Panama at the time, and visit him just out of the
Knocking the
clear.
door.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. And my boyfriend at the time arrived for a date and he said, "Where are we going?" And I said, "You're going to take me to the airport." And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Panama." And he said, "What? Do you have a ticket? Do you have money? Who are you going to see?" I said, A, I don't have a ticket. B, I don't have money. And C, I'm going to go visit my father. And he said to me, "Okay, I know you well enough that when your mind is made up, you're going to do it. But how are you going to do this without money? And you don't even know where your father is." And I said, "I know he's in the army. Come on now." What a silly question. And I have a credit card, see? And he said, but how will you get there? And I said, "You can drive me to the airport." He said, "But you need cash. Don't you have any?" And I said, "Well, I have $20." And he said, "Oh my God." So he opened his wallet and gave me all the money he had. So I went to the airport. He drove me. I got a ticket to Panama. This was obviously pre 9/11, right? Without revealing my age. And I got on the plane and I met this lovely woman. And she said, "So are you Panamanian?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, you're going on holiday?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, where are you staying?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Who are you seeing?" I said, "My dad." And she said, "Oh, he's expecting you." I said, "No." And she said, "Wait a second. You don't have a place to stay. Your dad doesn't know you're coming. Um, what are your plans?" And I said, "I don't know. Oh, my plans are to see Panama and my dad." And she said to me, "Well, okay, so let me at least guide you to a hotel." And she did, and it was magnificent. And here's my phone
If you need
number. She was
anything.
Panama, in case you get into a jam. And I said, "Not to worry, I won't, but thank you." So I go in the hotel, I check in, I pick up the phone, I call the army, and I said, "I'm going to talk to my dad." And they said, "Who is your dad?" And I said, "James Bowman, and he's stationed here in Panama." "Well, is he expecting you?" I said, "No." And they said, "Well, do you know what branch he's in?" I said, "No, but please find him." And they said, "Miss, where are you staying?" And I told them, they said, "Well, that's good. That's a safe place. That's where the military families stay." And I said, "All right, well, can you find him now?" And they said, "All right, hold on." About 20 minutes later, my dad gets on the phone. And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "In Panama." He said,
What the
"Where?" And I told him the hotel. He said, "Stay there." 15 minutes later, he's knocking on my door and he said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "Does your mom know you're here?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, let's call your mother." So he calls my mother and he goes, "Okay, do you know where our daughter is?" And she said, "Well, she's in New York. That's where she lives now." And he said, No, she's in Panama. Here, talk to your mom. And so my mom gets on the phone and she goes, what does your dad mean? You're in Panama? And I said, yeah, mom, that's where I am. But talk about mindset. I brought with me a winter wardrobe because in my mind,
If
it was winter all over. And in New York, there was a snowstorm. And my dad and my mom went bananas. And my dad said to me after he hung up, he said, don't you ever go anyplace. I said, excuse me, I'm an adult. He said, well, an adult doesn't do this. And he said, and did you bring clothes? And I said, yeah. And I opened up my suit because he goes, this is all winter clothes. It's 90 degrees here. So he had to take me shopping for a new wardrobe. But this is an example of a mindset that I knew I was going to find my father. I knew that it wasn't going to be a problem. And I had the mindset and courage that it was all going to be okay.
and the,
And they,
it's doing
I
a
was
little
doing
bit
a
of
little bit of
feedback.
feedback.
So one
So
moment.
one moment. Mm-hmm.
I'm
I'm
just
just
trying to
trying
stop
to
here the
stop here the
feedback.
feedback. So I think mindset is also not only your radar, it's your gut feeling.
And oops, are you
Oops,
listening
are
to
you
the
listening to
feedback
the
in your
feedback?
side, or is okay in
No,
your side?
no feedback here.
Okay. And the fascinating, I love the story and how much trust you had. I will be able to solve this. Because I think that you were confident that you are going to be able to solve it. And I think that is a great attitude, a great belief, and a mindset that must have served you well in many different circumstances in your life.
Yes.
And even yes, the thing about traveling, the thing about diversity is that capacity of learning and being put in different situations. After that, you knew that different countries, depending of where they are in the world, will have different climates. Could you have learned that in a different way? Probably yes, but you learn it that way. Was your own learning journey. And uh, when you were starting with your story, I immediately thought when I myself born and raised in Portugal, went in college years to England as an exchange student, and then that was a learning in itself. But the interesting thing was when I came back to Portugal to visit my family in the holidays, we were having a family dinner. And suddenly I noticed for the first time, I was 21 at the time, oh my gosh, we are loud. I never had realized that. It's like Mediterranean family, we speak, we are around the table, like imagine a good Italian family. But I had to live 6 months in another country, the different culture, for when I came back to my own culture of origin, I suddenly was aware we are loud. An interesting thing, many years later, I'm in holidays again in Portugal with my family, now with my daughter. My daughter at the time, maybe like 4 years old, again around the dinner table. Unfortunately, she doesn't speak Portuguese. I let that ball drop. But she turns to me, why is everybody mad with each other? I said, nobody's mad here. We are just having a passionate conversation about anything. We don't need to can be about carrots. And if carrots is the best color to describe a carrot, will be orange or something else. We don't care. We like to speak emotionally about things. But it's so fascinating that we have to go to different places, come back to be able to listen and to be aware of things that we are not aware before. And when even you were speaking about, you're telling about that one of your colleagues was speaking that a family member was in the Proud Boys and other things like that. The challenge so often is when we start to put ourselves in boxes, is the thing of being the other. We know this by sociology, by history, that is when we start to put so many distance between groups of people that we don't believe that is possible to communicate. That is the recipe to disaster, in my opinion.
I totally agree. I remember my trip to China and Japan. I observed, they have what I don't know the correct name, but there's something that I describe as pushers on the subway. And they literally push people. Their job is to push people to pack them into the transportation so that they can get from place A to B. And I thought to myself, wow, that's an interesting cultural dynamic. And explained a piece of culture that I might see here in the United States, right? It was interesting to see, actually see, now you may have read about it, but to see women walking behind men, I was like, what in the world is this? But you understand then when those cultures came here to the United States, the deference that is in existence because of their culture, right? So you really get a chance to learn so much. Now, it's not possible to travel as much as it was before, but we have the advantage of computers, Zoom, to learn about cultures. I love watching Gordon Ramsay when he's exploring
Yes.
different cultures. I think it's on National Geographic to learn cooking and how people find food. And I'm like,
Yes.
wow. So that's where it's found. So we have the opportunity to open our mindset, to reset it so that it's more inclusive, it's more knowledgeable, it's more accepting, so that it moves us further up the ladder in what we want to do to succeed.
Absolutely. And I just want to recognize the people that are live here. I see some people reacting. I see Dr. Candy William even commenting. So thank you for being here. If you have any specific question, you can add there as a comment for us.
Oh,
And
please read the comments. I can't see them.
let's see if I will send you in just the link to let's see, I will send you an email here with the link to the post, and then you will be able to see them. Just let me go here very quickly, send you that
So go to
email.
my email.
Yeah, and then you will have an email from me with the link to our LinkedIn post where you will see the comments.
Okay.
Uh, and while you are doing that, I just want to reflect back a couple, how do you say, the importance of communication, the importance of learning, the importance of even the traveling and the seeing different things. And that brings me to other two topics that I think are so important nowadays in corporations, both as somebody working in a corporation or as the executive coaches, leadership coaches that help organizations. That is representation and working in a virtual world and working at this distance, working from home. Because I think one of the arguments, in my opinion, for representation is that if you don't have representation of different groups and variety and diversity on the decision table, there are things that you are not going to be aware of, and you have to have those voices that have a more, because of their upbringing, because of their own personal stories, they will have an input that from more open and aware and travel that you were, you cannot have the same. So we really have to keep that, in my opinion, the effort in terms of representation to amplify the pool of opinions and perspectives to help us see the complexity of things. And now that is even more important, in my opinion, with the working from home and the virtual, that, yes, help us to survive 2020 in incredible ways. And at the same time, we don't have the water cooler experience of the office anymore. We and how can we, because even going back a little bit to, you're saying your father was in the military, like it or not like it, when the military was not an option, was everybody, boy at certain age had to go to the military, was a big melting pot culturally. People were together that they in other circumstances were not together. Now, because it's a voluntary thing here in the United States, there is already not, is not as diverse as it was before. The workplace can be more diverse, but if we don't have to go to the office, we don't have the challenge to overcome and to understand so well the other. It's easier to stay so I would love to listen to your thoughts about that.
So there was a couple of things that you surfaced, and I should have written them down, but I didn't. One, yeah, here it is. First, the first step within the office is diversity. The second step, which is equally powerful, is inclusion. And they're very different. Diversity, you're invited to the party. Inclusion, you're invited to dance at the party. Right?
I like that.
Thank you. And so I think that the comparing the separation of people who were in the war to the separation of people as a result of the pandemic is different in
Yes.
this way. We have the opportunity actually to learn more about each other as a result of the pandemic and the new normal of communicating. I think that in the beginning, we all said, oh, wow, we're going to be separated and we won't have the water cooler experience. But I think we have to give that up because it's actually proven that we have more unity and we have the opportunity for more union and inclusion than we did around standing around the water cooler. Here's why. In an organization, different social groups are formed. And so you have different norms. You have like little nuclei of groups. And while one group is at the water cooler, the other group may be not invited to the water cooler conversation. Or an individual may not feel comfortable walking into that dialogue. On Zoom, where everybody is there for a meeting, right? You have more of an opportunity to see inside the being of each person. And what do I mean by that? If you don't have a virtual screen,
See the home.
that's the big if, you get to see what's in back of the person. So for me, you could see what books I read if you blow up the screen. You could see my dad was in the military. If I tilt my screen up, you might see a doll. You'll see a doll that my mom had, so I inherited it before she passed away. Um, you'll see stores that I shop at. You'll see organization for clips and things like that. You could tell I'm a very organized person, maybe extremely. My books are, for the most part, all standing up this way or this way. Um, You'll see a sign over here, but you'll see how I'm dressed. You'll see my hair. In other words, you get to start to experience more about the person than you would
The
in an
office.
office setting, right? You may see some religious artifacts. You might see or hear
The
my four-legged
London.
preacher. London, Sir London Slate Bowman, who is a Karen Terrier, which means he owns the space, right? You might see my husband floating in and out, right? You'll see my husband is not black. You'll see he's older. He's a silver fox. He looks like one of the Sopranos, right? So you'll get to, if I'm in the kitchen, you'll see, if I turn my camera, you'll see a whole row of cookbooks because he's a chef, right? I used to own a catering business. You'll see a tapestry that I bought when I was in Belgium. So you get to see more about me than my suit in a corporate setting. For me, that's an opportunity to discuss. It gives you freedom to discuss the person. It gives you the opportunity to have an inclusion or inclusive conversation. Oh, I see you have a book about gardening, right? And then the whole dialogue starts. So
So,
that's my pushback.
and I absolutely love it. That, and again, is not either or,
Right.
is how can we bring and how can we learn and how we can transform. I always love that phrase, if life gives you lemons, do lemonade. And I go now to the extreme, if life gives you lemon, do lemonade, or if you fancy, lemoncello. So is we so we have to have this capacity of transform things and be open to things. And I think
Absolutely.
I love how our conversation has evolved in terms about learning from different perspectives, different cultures, from our own adventures. So, what, and being aware of the time, what will be a message that we can leave other people, mainly somebody start working in an organization or executive coach, or somebody that is starting in the executive coaching world, working in organizations, for them to exercise this muscle, because this is a muscle that we have to exercise, and so important to have the flexibility of adapting to different circumstances, of learning from different circumstances. So ideas or tips for us to exercise this muscle.
I love what you said. It's so true. It is a muscle. And so often we let it atrophy. And, I remember when I was taking training to sit on boards of directors, the woman who was leading it, Susan, who's an amazing woman, said to us, the most important thing you can do when you get a board seat is to shut up. I said, wait, aren't you there to contribute? And her point was that you remain quiet and listen and learn.
And CB, just one moment. I lost my sound at the moment. So if you can hear me, please do a thumbs up. If you can hear me, no, you cannot hear me either. So one moment here. Now, 1, 2, 3. Can you listen? Or is still muffled? And now I cannot listen to you. And now? And I cannot hear you. So, so you can now you can listen to me. Thumbs up. And I cannot listen to you, and I don't know in LinkedIn as it is. So we have here an example. I can hear you now. And Candice, can you hear us both? So I will ask Dr. Dr. Candy, if you can time there, if you can listen to us both, or just me, Anna, or CB. So, and we have here interesting communication challenge that we cannot hear each other. And CB was exactly speaking about the importance of listening. So I can hear Anna, but not CB. Oh, thank you. So for everybody, please follow CB Bowman. She has these amazing LinkedIn lives because she has several. So just I will make sure that I will put somewhere here in one of the comments her LinkedIn profile for you to go follow her. Check she has in diversity and inclusion. She has about the C-suite. She has about marketing. Please follow her, and she has amazing content. And if any of these subjects is of interest to you, mainly the diversity and inclusion and executive corporate, because she has an association, the Association of Corporate Executive Coaching, please reach out to her to learn more about